The sky changed color without warning. One moment, it was blue, calm, quiet. The next, it turned blood red. Clouds vanished, replaced by glowing cracks like veins of fire stretching across the heavens. People stopped in the streets, pointing up, confused, scared. Then the first blast came. A wave of energy shot from the sky, burning through the tallest buildings in New York. Glass melted, steel bent, and people screamed. Commander Rafe Torres was in the training facility when the shockwave hit. He was thrown against the wall as alarms began to blare. Emergency lights flickered. But the power didn't last long. The screen in front of him blinked with one final message before going black. Global invasion detected unknown hostile force. Repeat, hostile force. Outside, the world was on fire. He crawled out through the rubble, bleeding from his arm. Coughing from smoke, the training grounds were gone, crushed under the weight of something massive. A shadow passed overhead, smooth, silent, metallic. The ship floated like a god, its surface pulsing with blue light. No sound came from it, only death followed. From the sky, more of them came, long black ships shaped like knives. They fell slowly, as if they had all the time in the world. And maybe they did. The Varnock had arrived. The Varnock were not like any alien Rafe had seen in old military files or conspiracy videos. They didn't roar, didn't growl, didn't even speak. They only transmitted a message. One that was burned into every screen, phone, and even the minds of the survivors. We are the Varnock. We are the final race. Immortal, supreme, perfect. You are obsolete. Your time ends now. The ground rumbled again, this time from the inside of the Earth. The ships released small drones, black like insects, fast like bullets. They searched, scanned, and destroyed. The drones had no mercy. They didn't hesitate. Children, soldiers, doctors, they all fell the same. Rafe ran, not because he was scared, but because someone had to survive. He jumped into a broken drainage tunnel, covered the opening with steel debris, and waited. Hours passed. Or maybe days. He didn't know. There was no sunlight, only darkness, cold, and the sound of distant explosions above. When he finally climbed out, the world had changed. Skyscrapers were piles of ash, cars burned in the streets, and the sky was still red. He saw no birds, no planes, no humans, only silence. But then, movement. He raised his weapon, ready to fire. But it was just a child, a little boy, barefoot, crying, holding a broken toy. Rafe lowered his gun, picked up the boy, and whispered, "You're not alone." The human race had been caught off guard, unprepared, unarmed. But something deep inside them had survived a fire. A will, a reason to fight. The Varnock were perfect, immortal, powerful. But they didn't understand one thing. Humans don't break, not forever. Rafe stood on the rooftop of a half-broken building, staring at the sky that still burned red. His face was covered in dirt, blood, and determination. He clenched his fist and spoke quietly to the wind. "They think it's over," he said. "But it's just starting." The streets were silent now, filled with smoke and ash. But deep beneath the ruins of New Chicago, life still moved. Rafe walked slowly through an old subway tunnel, holding a flashlight in one hand and a pistol in the other. The little boy from before followed close behind him, his small hand gripping Rafe's belt. They didn't talk, not yet. Not until they were sure no drones were nearby. After 2 hours of crawling, ducking, and listening, they reached the meeting point. It was hidden behind a collapsed section of the wall. An old maintenance room turned into a shelter. Inside, a small group of survivors waited, dirty, tired, and scared. There were only 9 of them, a few adults, 2 teens, and 1 woman who used to be a nurse. When Rafe stepped in, their faces lifted with a spark of hope. They called it the pit, because it was dark, damp, and deep underground, but it was also safe for now. Rafe shared what he'd seen above, how the sky still burned, how the ships hovered like vultures. The others listened in silence, some with tears in their eyes. No one spoke about revenge yet, only survival. But survival wasn't enough. Not for Rafe, not anymore. He looked at the group and said what they were too scared to say: if we don't fight back, they'll wipe us out, every last one. A few looked down. One man shook his head, but then a voice came from the back of the room. "I know how we hit them," said a girl, barely 17, with oil stains on her hands and wires wrapped around her belt. Her name was Lynn, a street mechanic and hacker from Sector 12. She stepped forward, holding a damaged Varnak drone in her arms. "I disabled this before it could explode," she said, placing it on the table. "And I found something weird." Rafe stepped closer, frowning. "What do you mean weird?" Lynn opened a panel and showed them the core. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. "It's not just a machine," she said. "It's partly organic, partly code. But the strange thing is, it has blind spots, moments where it can't see, can't think." That one sentence changed everything. Rafe's eyes narrowed, his voice calm but serious. "Can we use it?" Lynn nodded slowly. "Maybe, but we'd have to move fast and careful, and we need more drones to study." They didn't have much, but they had will, that night. The group planned their first strike, not to destroy a ship, but to capture another drone, to test, to learn, to find weakness. If the Varnak believed they were perfect, then somewhere in that perfection was a crack at sunrise, or what was left of it through the red skies. Rafe and Lynn crawled out into the ruins. They moved through broken alleys and burned-out vehicles, searching for targets, and after an hour, they found one, a Varnak scout drone scanning the wreckage of a collapsed mall. It hovered silently, its glowing sensors shifting as it floated. Rafe held his breath, raised his weapon, and fired a magnetic net device Lynn had built using scrap parts. The net hit perfectly, wrapping the drone in wires that blocked its signals. It thrashed once, then went still. They rushed forward, grabbed it, and ran back before any others noticed. Back in the pit, Lynn opened the new drone, digging deeper than before. This one had maps, signal logs, even part of a command path to a larger ship. For the first time since the invasion, they weren't just hiding, they were fighting, and the Varnak didn't know it yet. The cold wind howled across the Arctic wastes. Snow whipped against the metal of the abandoned facility, buried deep under the ice. The place had no name anymore. Only numbers faded on rusted walls. Long ago, it was a secret research base built during the Cold War. Then it was forgotten, left frozen, locked by time. Now, it was waking up. Rafe stood at the entrance, staring at the sealed blast door. Lynn was beside him, her breath fogging in the air, her fingers already typing on a tablet she had modified with Varnak parts. The rest of the team stayed hidden in the snow-covered cave behind them, weapons ready, hearts racing. They had followed a hidden signal found inside the drone's memory, a frequency buried under layers of alien code. It led them here, far from cities, far from survivors, far from safety. Rafe ran his hand across the old steel, then gave Lynn a nod. "Let's open it," he said. Sparks danced as Lynn sliced into the control panel. The door shook, groaned, then slowly slid open, revealing a long hallway lit by emergency red lights. Still somehow working after all these years, they stepped inside, their boots echoing against the metal floor. Frost clung to the walls, and ice formed strange patterns, like veins reaching toward the heart of the base. They passed rooms full of broken monitors, shattered chairs, and crates with faded warning signs. Most of it was useless junk, but Rafe wasn't looking for tools. He was searching for the thing the old scientists had built and hidden away. A weapon that never saw war because it was too unstable, too dangerous, too human. At the very bottom of the base, in a chamber surrounded by thick blast doors. They found it. It wasn't a gun, not exactly. It looked like a sarcophagus made of dark steel and copper, covered in warning symbols. Wires crawled across the floor like vines, and in the center was a chair with a helmet attached. The label. On the wall read, Project Sovereign Neural Fusion Prototype. Rafe stepped forward, staring at it. What is it? Lynn whispered. Rafe shook his head slowly. It was meant to connect with a pilot's mind, amplify thoughts, emotions, memories, turn them into raw power. Lynn's eyes widened. So, runs on feelings. Oh, something like that. Rafe said, but they shut it down because no one survived the test runs. Silence filled the room. Then Lynn said what neither of them wanted to hear. If it connects to emotions, it might work against the Varnock. Rafe turned to her. Their systems don't register emotion. They see it as noise, as failure. Lynn nodded. That noise could blind them. The others entered slowly, faces pale from the cold, eyes locked on the machine. No one volunteered at first. Then, Rafe stepped forward, his voice calm. I'll do it. Lynn tried to protest, but he raised a hand. If this thing kills me, try again. But if it works, we'll make them bleed. They powered it up. Using batteries stolen from Varnock scout ships, the machine hummed, then roared, lights flickering as it came alive. Rafe sat in the chair, breathing slowly. Lynn placed the helmet over his head, and the machine closed around him. For a moment, there was silence. Then Rafe's body shook, and the lights burst with energy. The room filled with heat, pressure, sound. Images from his memories flashed on the monitors, his family, the battle. The sky burning red. The little boy he saved, the promise he made. Suddenly, the machine pulsed outward, sending out a wave of energy that fried the lights in the hallway. The Varnock ship orbiting above the region shook, its systems shorting for just a moment. It was the first time a human signal had touched their command network, and they didn't like it. They didn't understand how it happened, or why, but it had begun, and they would soon learn that emotions, pain, loss, hope, all the things they had erased from their perfect race were now their greatest threat. Asterisk light did not exist in the Varnock Council chamber, not the kind humans knew. Instead, the room shimmered with waves of thought. Pulsing colors visible only to the minds of those born immortal. They were thousands of years old, older than Earth's first cities, older than human memory, and yet, for the first time in 1,000 years, they hesitated. 7 Varnock minds gathered, floating silently in the mental nexus. They shared no faces, no voices. Only pure communication, instant, absolute, cold. The high speaker broke the silence first, his thoughts trembling. A human signal breached our command layer. The others processed the message in microseconds. None responded right away. It was not random, said another. It was not noise, pain. Murmured a third, anger, sorrow, hate. It infected the network. The room pulsed with unease. Something rare among beings who had erased fear from their evolution. They began to replay the signal, frame by frame, memory by memory. A child screaming in the rubble, a soldier carrying a wounded friend, a woman dying with a smile to protect her son. It should have been meaningless to them, but it wasn't. One counselor spoke slowly. We removed emotion, called it weakness. But these humans, said another. They survived through it. The high speaker darkened in thought. Destroy them before they evolve, he ordered. But one mind, slightly younger than the others, dared to disagree. She was named Valera, young by Varnock standards, only 400 years old, curious, analytical, and deeply disturbed by what she saw. They're not just reacting, she said. They're adapting, learning, becoming something new. Another snapped back. They are fragile. Their bodies break. Their minds burn. Valera pushed her thoughts sharper, faster. Yes, But they choose to suffer and still fight. For the first time, the Council had no answer. They were beings who could not die, could not feel, could not grow anymore. Their knowledge was infinite. But their evolution had ended long ago. Now they faced a species that should have crumbled, but didn't. Instead, humans stood again and again. Not because they were stronger, but because they refused to fall. On a nearby screen, they watched. A recording grainy footage from a drone's final moment. A human child covered in ash ran into the fire to pull out a wounded dog. It made no logical sense. There was no reward, no survival advantage, no command, and yet the child had done it. The Council went silent again. Valera spoke quietly. "You fear them?" The High Speaker turned to her, his mind flaring red. "We fear nothing, but..." Deep down, the truth was already spreading through the Varnic link. Fear had returned. And its name was humanity. The Council issued a new order. Activate the final pulse. A wave that would sweep across Earth and erase all remaining organic resistance. Simple, clean, complete. But Valera hesitated. She watched the footage one last time, eyes fixed on a human face smiling through pain. She disconnected from the Nexus without permission and vanished into the data streams. She had made a decision. One that would be called betrayal. She would not stop the pulse, but she would warn them, the humans. Because deep in her perfect mind, a strange question had formed. Not logical, not approved, not Varnac. What if they deserved to win? Snow fell softly over the remains of New Chicago. Flakes of ash drifted with it, mixing fire and winter into a gray silence. Rafe sat by a cracked window, watching the frozen streets, his breath rising in clouds. The shelter was hidden below. A fallen train station, its roof held up by steel beams and stubborn luck. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. Lynn sat nearby, her hands moving fast over a salvaged console, splicing human wires with alien cables, their stolen drone. Lay in pieces on the table, still humming faintly each night. The machines flew lower, scanning deeper, hunting more. They knew time was short, but didn't know how short until she arrived. At first, they thought it was a trick. A Varnock signal appeared just outside the perimeter, alone, unguarded, floating. In still air, Rafe raised his rifle, aiming through the cracked doorway. Then the shape became clear. It wasn't a drone or a weapon. It was one of them, alive, glowing. Drifting down like a ghost in the snow, the others readied their weapons, whispering warnings. Rafe stepped forward slowly. Gun aimed at her chest, but the alien made no move to attack. She raised her hands, or what looked like hands, more light than bone, and spoke. Her voice was not sound, but thought pressed gently into their minds. "I am Valera," she said. "I do not come to destroy." Rafe didn't lower his weapon then. "Why are you here?" he asked. Valera's light flickered, like a breath being held. "The Council will activate the final pulse," she said. "It will wipe out all human life in less than one cycle." Gasps came from behind Rafe, but he didn't react. He kept his aim steady, his voice low. "And why would you tell us that?" Valera hesitated, her form dimming. "Because I watched your people, and I felt something I do not understand." Lynn stepped beside him, watching the alien carefully. "You're a traitor," she said. Valera turned toward her. "No," she answered, "I am." Curious, she moved closer, slowly, deliberately, then placed a data crystal on the ground. "This contains the path to the pulse core," she said. "It is deep within the skyborne fortress above your planet." Rafe narrowed his eyes. "And how are we supposed to get up there?" Valera looked at him, her glow pulsing with something close to sadness. "There is one way, but it requires more than weapons." Rafe picked up the crystal, feeling the hum of alien code inside it. She was giving them the impossible a chance. But it would cost them everything. Valera looked around at the humans. Dirty, cold, hungry, injured, and still standing. She whispered into their minds. You are a flawed species, broken and wild. But you are the only ones who still change. Then she stepped back into the snow, her form fading. I will not be allowed to return, she said, if you fail. All will burn. Then she vanished, leaving nothing behind but falling flakes and the sound of Rafe's heartbeat growing louder in his ears. He turned to the group, holding the crystal tight. We're not just surviving anymore, he said. We're going to hit back up there. He looked up through the broken ceiling, into the burning sky, to the stars. The wind screamed across the broken city. Carrying ash like snow, Rafe stood with his small team on the edge of a ruined rooftop. Staring up at the dark shapes in the sky, the Varnock fortress hovered. There, a giant spiderweb of metal and light. It was alive, humming with power, and waiting. Lynn worked quickly, her fingers flying over the alien device they had captured from Valera's data crystal. It was their only way inside a stolen passcode wrapped in layers of Varnock encryption. No one knew if it would work, but they had no choice. The clock was ticking behind them. The others prepared weapons, rifles, explosives, homemade gadgets, all crafted from scrap and hope. This was not a battle of soldiers and machines, but of wills and desperation. They slipped inside the fortress through a hidden dock. Cloaked in stolen alien tech that blurred their shapes, the walls around them glowed with strange symbols. Pulsing softly, they moved like shadows, silent and careful. Every step could be their last. Deep inside, they reached the core, a chamber filled with light and sound beyond human imagining. At its center was the pulse generator, a massive device humming like a heartbeat, ready to release destruction. Guarding it was the Varnock war leader. Tall and cold, his eyes like frozen stars, he turned to face them. Voice calm and empty. You cannot win, he said. We are immortal, perfect, inevitable. Rafe stepped forward, heart pounding but voice steady. Immortal, maybe, he said, but you forgot one thing. Humans never stop fighting. The war leader laughed, a sound like cracking ice. Rafe raised his weapon, but then dropped it. No guns, he said. This fight is not with bullets. He pulled out a small device, the neural fusion helmet from the Arctic base. He put it on, feeling a rush of memories, pain, love, loss, emotions the Varnock could never feel. His mind burned with power, flames of anger and hope. He reached out with his thoughts, and the room trembled. The Varnock war leader tried to block him, but it was no use. Human emotions flooded the chamber, confusing the alien systems, breaking the cold logic. The pulse generator faltered. Sparks flying, lights flickering. Rafe pushed harder, driven by memories of his fallen friends, the children saved, the sky that burned red. The fortress shook violently, metal groaning and cracking. Explosions erupted as the systems failed. The Varnock war leader fell to his knees, defeated not by strength, but by something he could never understand, the fire inside a human heart. Outside, the fleet began to fall from the sky. Ships crashing into oceans and mountains. The war was not over, but the tide had turned. Rafe pulled off the helmet, gasping for breath. He looked to his team, tired but alive. We did it, he said softly, but this is just the beginning. The sky was quiet now, but the air still smelled of fire and metal. Rafe stood among the ruins of a world that had almost ended. Around him were survivors, tired faces, broken bodies, but unbroken spirits. They looked to him not just as a leader, but as a symbol of hope. The Varnock fleet lay shattered in the skies and seas, their great ships burning like fallen stars. The immortals who thought themselves above all had learned their greatest mistake. They had faced a species that did not fear death, that carried pain and hope together, and in that flame the Varnock had been broken. But the victory was bitter. Cities were gone, millions lost, and Earth itself scarred. Rafe walked through a once great city, ashes underfoot. He found the little boy he had saved months ago, now older in eyes, but still holding that broken toy. They exchanged a silent nod. No words could carry the weight of what they had survived. Far away, in the silent dark of space, another race. Watched the battle's end, they saw what the Varnock could not. That humanity was not a weakness, but a force, a wild flame that refused to be put out. They turned their ships away, leaving Earth alone. For now, Rafe stood on a hill overlooking the horizon. The first sunrise in months breaking the red sky. His voice was low, but full of promise. "This is our world," he said, "and we will rise from the ashes, stronger, freer, unbroken." He raised his fist, not in anger, but in hope, for humanity had faced the immortal and won. Their greatest mistake had become their greatest triumph, and the story of Earth was far from over.